Good day everyone, I am Carlo Ian S. Morgadez, and this day I will be sharing to you the 21st century literacies focusing on globalization and multicultural literacy. Before we are going to delve in to globalization and multicultural literacy, let us have a short background about OECD. OECD, or Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is an intergovernmental economic organization with 37 member countries. It is a forum of countries describing themselves as committed to democracy and the market economy, providing a platform to compare policy experiences, seek answers to common problems, identify good practices, and coordinate domestic and international policies of its members. OECD envisions an inclusive and sustainable world where citizens will have a capacity for: first, living harmoniously in multicultural communities; second, thriving in a changing labor market; third, using media platform effectively and responsibly; fourth, supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The organization proposes that developing students' global competence through education can result in a more inclusive and sustainable world. The organization argues that global competence is vital because around the world, in the face of widening income gaps, there is a need to dissolve tensions and rebuild social capital. What is global competence? Global competence is the capacity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, to understand and appreciate the perspective and worldviews of others, to engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions with people from different cultures, and to act for collective well-being and sustainable development. There are 4 dimensions of global competence. First, examine issues of local, global, and cultural significance. This dimension refers to globally competent people's practices of effectively combining knowledge about the world and critical reasoning whenever they form their own opinion about a global issue. People who acquire a mature level of development in this dimension use thinking skills such as selecting and weighing appropriate evidence to reason about global developments. Second, understand and appreciate the perspective and worldviews of others. This dimension highlights that globally competent people are willing and capable of considering global problems and other people's perspective and behaviors from multiple viewpoints. Engaging with different perspectives and worldviews requires individuals to examine the origins and implication of others and their own assumptions. This turn implies a profound respect for and interest in who the other is, their concept of reality, and their emotions. Third, engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions across cultures. This dimension addresses appreciation of respectful dialogue, desire to understand the other, and efforts to include marginalized groups. Fourth, take action for collective well-being and sustainable development. This dimension focuses on young people's role as active and responsible members of society and refers to individuals' readiness to respond to a given local, global, or intercultural issue or situation. The figure shows that competence is not merely a specific skill, but it is a combination of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. The figure shows how global competence is defined as the combination of the 4 dimensions: examining issues, understanding perspective, interacting across cultural differences, and taking action, and how each dimension builds on specific knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. What is globalization? Globalization describes the process of creating networks of connections among actors of intra- or multi-continental distances, mediated through a variety of flows including people, information, and ideas, capital, and goods. Moreover, globalization is a process that erodes national boundaries, integrates national economies, cultures, technologies, and governance, and produces complex relations of mutual interdependence. There are 3 dimensions of globalization. First, we have economic globalization. This characterizes long-distance flow of goods, capital, and services, as well as information and perceptions that accompany market exchanges. Second, social globalization expresses the spread of ideas, information, images, and people. Today, we have different social media platforms that we can use to express our ideas and spread information. Third, political globalization characterizes the diffusion of government policy. Here are the examples of political globalization, which includes the government organizations. First, World Trade Organization, United Nations, International Monetary Fund, and European Union. Now, let us move on to multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, defined as the coexistence of diverse cultures, where culture includes racial, religious, or cultural groups and is manifested in customary behaviors, cultural assumptions and values, patterns of thinking, and communicative styles. These are the following who are described as traditionally underserved in a multicultural society. First, immigrant minorities. They are permanent settlers who possess their own language and culture, which are distinct from those of the host society. Second, persons seeking asylum. They are refugees and residents with a temporary stay permit. Third, migrant workers. Temporary immigrant workers and their dependents are included. They are immigrants who do not intend to stay permanently, and those legal status is that of temporary resident. Fourth, national minorities. These are indigenous or long-established groups with a long-standing and distinct ethnic, linguistic, or cultural identity, distinct from that of the majority. Multicultural societies are characterized by people of different races, ethnicities, and nationalities living together in the same community. In multicultural communities, people retain, pass down, celebrate, and share their unique cultural ways of life, languages, art, traditions, and behaviors. Now let us proceed to multicultural literacy. Multicultural literacy is the ability to orientate in a different cultural environment. To dispose of the literacy of this type means to be tolerant, to respect manifold cultures, to have pro-social behavior without prejudices and barrier toward people coming from various cultures, and to accept differences in the broadest sense, thus also explicitly position against intolerance, racism, and xenophobia. Now, what is intercultural communication? Intercultural communication refers to the effects on communication behavior when different cultures interact together. Hence, way of viewing intercultural communication is as communication that unfolds in symbolic intercultural spaces. What is the importance of intercultural communication? Intercultural communication is an important part of intercultural competence, or the ability to effectively function across culture and with those from other cultures. As our world gets smaller and globalization gets stronger, intercultural competence and great intercultural communication become a necessity to be successful. There are 7 tips in managing intercultural communication. First, common tropes and problems. Every culture has their own gestures and way of speaking. It is important to educate yourself on some common faux pas of that culture. Second, learn phrases in their language. It shows that you recognize the cultural difference, respect their culture, and are willing to learn about it. Start with learning hello and thank you if you are meeting with someone you know speaks another language. Third, adopt your behavior. When you enter in an intercultural communication exchange, there may be an expectation in both sides for the other party to adapt to the other's culture. Fourth, check your understanding. Listen carefully and check your own understanding regularly throughout the conversation. Fifth, apologize. If you have offended someone, apologize promptly. Don't let it fester or become awkward. Use television. Watching series of other cultures can really aid you in intercultural communication if you have no other ways to access that culture. Seventh, reflect on experience. Reflect on your past intercultural exchanges. what made them not work out the way it was intended. 21st century students live in an interconnected, diverse, and rapidly changing world. Emerging economic, digital, cultural, demographic, and environmental forces are shaping young people's lives around the planet and increasing their intercultural encounters on a daily basis. This complex environment presents both an opportunity and a challenge. Young people today must not only learn to participate in a more interconnected world, but also appreciate and benefit from cultural differences. Developing a global and intercultural outlook is a process, a lifelong process that education can shape. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless us all.